a student at TCU studying environmental science and sustainability, and today I wanted to talk to you about the benefits of prescribed burns and what they can do for our environment and also our own personal health. So I'm going to go over an introduction and then a little bit of background history about prescribed burns, and then some research and data discussing what was found in that research, and then I can get all for you. So to start, over the summer I was able to participate in a prescribed burn when interning with the Fort Worth Nature Center. By doing this, I was able to learn a lot about the process of what goes into preparing for a prescribed burn and how it's performed itself. So I was able to learn about how months in advance we are working on clearing the land and making sure that everything is mapped out correctly in order to ensure the safest and most successful burn. This is also just a little information. These are all found on the Fort Worth Nature Center Instagram, which is important. I encourage you to follow because they post a lot about what's going on in your environment and your neighborhoods, and it's important to be up to date on what's going on in your own backyard, essentially. So some things to know. The southern U.S. is the biggest performers of prescribed burns in the United States. That's what I'm going to be focusing on in this discussion and a lot of where my data and research is pulled from. There are some terminology like slash burns, which refers to a burn that is performed in order to prepare for harvest or any sort of planting or preparation, or is performed after harvest in order to bring that nutrients back into the soil and re-enrich the soil essentially and promote healthier plant growth for following seasons. There's also underburning, which refers to managing natural fuels, which refers to like large overgrown plants, brush, anything that catches fire really easily and can then result in wildfires, which can be very damaging and harmful and have quite the opposite effect of a prescribed burn. And finally, there's a very strong importance. People use prescribed burns and controlled burns interchangeably. There's actually a big difference. People try to use prescribed burns more since a fire, as scary as it sounds, can never be 100% controlled. It kind of gives a false sense of that we are able to do that. There's always a small chance of flame jumping. But like I said, a lot of preparation goes into these prescribed burns to try to avoid that. So people are now resorting to using the term prescribed burn instead of controlled burn. So to start, a little bit of background. Prescribed burns are used to meet land management objectives. This can be controlling invasive species, enriching environments for plants and animals, enriching soil, getting rid of all that brush that is usually used as fuel for wildfires, among with many other benefits. Planting burns involves a lot of predetermined and pre-planned steps. It's months in planning. It starts in a room with a group of people planning about where it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what steps need to be made in order to ensure that surrounding communities are going to be safe. The prescribed burn is going to take place at an appropriate time, having to check weather maps and see if it's going to be windy or raining or whatever. All these small details go into being able to perform a successful burn with the least amount of chance for a fire going out of control or any negative effects like that. A little bit of history, since we don't really know where prescribed burns began. Obviously, fires have been occurring since the beginning of time, naturally, through lightning and dry brush and stuff. But it's thought that the first people to intentionally use fire as a way for land management, controlling game as like in birds and animals, were the Native Americans, and it's kind of gone from there. So it's been used for thousands of years to perform very similar techniques that we use today in performing prescribed burns. And during the 1970s and 80s, that's when prescribed burns became more common due to agencies and foresters recognizing the importance in forest management. So really just being able to see how it improves ecosystems, soil, all that stuff that I previously stated. So here's a little timeline. 1940s is when the first term prescribed burn originated. From there, in 1958, the first prescribed burn was performed in Everglade National Park. When prescribed burns first began, they were really only done in private properties and national forests. And then in 1979, the Fish and Wildlife Service established a formal fire management program for prescribed burns. And then in 1980, the Vegetation Management Program, or VMP, was established, which allowed California Department of Forestry to partner with private landowners to perform prescribed burns. So now that you have a little bit of background, I'm going to go into the research that I looked over that covered these 12 states in the southern United States. Like I said, the South is the largest contributor to prescribed burns in the United States. So there was a lot of information on the South specifically. So this, like I said, they surveyed 12 states. Surveys were sent out to each of these states in their forestry programs, asking them certain questions such as the average burn area between 1985 and 1994 for both slash reduction and underburning. They also wanted it to be scaled on a scale of 0, 1 to 5, so 0 being not important, 5 being the most important. They also wanted to look at historic and predicted trends, barriers to expanding the use of prescribed burns, and annual area for prescribed burning needed to achieve management goals. And the whole purpose of collecting all this information was to be able to look at how prescribed burns have been used in the past, how they're going to be used in the future, and how much land is going to be burned, how this might affect economic components of cost, people needed to perform these burns, and maybe the costs overall. So these were the overall results from the studies, the surveys they collected. This first shows all the 12 states and the amount of acreage burned annually in the pine areas. This kind of shows that, or how it varies from different states. Also, this has to do with the pine population in each state, which is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And then the pine chart over here shows the difference between national forests and state or private use of prescribed burns and how they vary dependent on use. So, like I said, slash reduction used for kind of more agricultural components of burns, and then underburning used to reduce things like wildfires. Mm-hmm. And there are many different aspects, like I listed before, about why we use prescribed burns, but for this study, these were the main focuses. So these results showed that from 1985 to 1984, 4.1 million acres of pine forest had been burned. 88% of that was private land and 12% was national forests. The trend shows that over the observed time frame, burning for slash reduction decreased and underburning has increased. This can be due to climate change and lack of moisture and areas becoming drier. This increases areas that are more prone to wildfires, and which could be the reason why more focus is going into trying to get rid of that fuel, that wildfire fuel, and where most of the prescribed burns are taking place. And the primary goal of these burns were to reduce hazardous fuels, habitat management for game birds and animals, and endangered species management, as well as ecosystem restoration. And it was shown that the national forests engaged more with focusing on endangered species management, while private landowners were focusing more on ecosystem restoration. So I wanted to look at a few other studies and see where they're grabbing from economic perspectives as well as other environmental perspectives. So this other study showed kind of more in depth with wildfires and how over the range of different years, so this would be like 1 or 2 years after a prescribed burn occurred all the way to like 7 to 10 years, and how performing these prescribed burns have reduced the ignition of wildfires as well as wildfire behaviors, so how large they are, how easy they are to control and such. And this is another related to wildfires, and is a nice graph that shows how the rate of spread, flame length, fuel consumption, duration of smoldering, and overstory tree mortality has been decreased majorly a little bit, but as you can see, overall there's been either large major decreases or minor decreases in all these aspects, which just goes to show that performing these prescribed burns are successfully preventing wildfires as well as improving tree canopy cover, because that's where the main difference between wildfires and prescribed burns is that wildfires are more destructive. They can destroy high canopy as low as low canopy plants, whereas prescribed burns focus mainly on managing the low canopy plants and protecting to where high canopy plants can thrive. This looks at more of the economic side of prescribed burns and shows how looking at cost, duration of wildfire events, and equipment needed, as well as number of people. This is often used as a main argument against prescribed burns. This is still kind of a gray area in terms of research. More research has obviously been focused on environmental impact, and this is an area that still could use more research to gain more information. But as you can see, that there's been a decrease in the equipment needed and overall all economic components. There is variation between the requirements and needs for those resources, but then it's been proven and kind of been able to support that the needs of these resources kind of are justifiable to perform the beneficials of prescribed burns on the environment. So in conclusion, there's been multiple studies that have shown that prescribed burns are very beneficial to the environment in terms of soil nutrients, protection of invasive species, ecosystems for plants and animals, and so on. There are so many aspects of prescribed burns that can be looked at and more learned about, such as impacts on human health as well as the economy. But performing more studies in the future and being able to understand how prescribed burns are affecting the environment, as well as the economy and human health will help us develop future burn strategies that can kind of encompass human health, the economy, as well as the environmental impacts to kind of create the Goldilocks